Upon the resignation and death of President Felmley, Herman Henry Schrader, Dean of the Normal University, was named acting president. Schrader bent his efforts toward keeping the affairs of the school running smoothly. His judgments were generally respected, and some hoped the board would select him as the permanent president. However, in May of 1930, Dr. Harry Alvin Brown, the president of the Wisconsin Teachers College, was named as the 7th president of Illinois State Normal University. Upon his arrival, Brown pledged his loyalty and commitment to make Normal the most outstanding teachers' college in the nation. When Dr. Brown took over the presidency, the school was threatened with a lower rating due to inadequate qualifications within the training school staff. Brown moved immediately to maintain the school's rating by hiring a director and 3 supervisors. However, this action resulted in the reassignment of some older faculty, and since President Brown had made his decisions without consulting the staff, he also set the tone that would characterize his administration. The new president, like those before him, had dreams of new buildings, but it was hardly a time to advance a new building program, especially when the old main tower was leaning and the roof sagging. When it was discovered that the floor of the old main had dropped 3 inches overnight, a call to Springfield released emergency funds for steel supports to straighten the tower and preserve the upper part of the structure for a few more years. President Brown also had early plans to address the need for special training in the study of the gifted, physically and mentally challenged, incorrigibles, and truants. But any plans the president had for special education or new buildings would have to be postponed, for the nation was in the throes of a depression with hundreds of people in breadlines. However, even with the tough economic times, enrollment in teachers' colleges actually increased as young people gravitated toward the low tuition and responded to declining opportunities in industry. Most students hoped to work their way through college. Some brought food from home and lived in the cheapest of furnished rooms. Patches were not uncommon, and socks were saved for special occasions. Haircuts were a luxury. Although the students had little money to spend on necessities, let alone the pleasures of college life, the university continued charging a student activity fee. The fee ensured the continuation of the vidette, lecture courses, oratorical and musical events, and literary and athletic contests. In 1934, for the first time, movies, and according to the index, good ones at that, were provided. Faculty also felt the hard times. Salary increases came to a halt, and many teachers had to share their salaries with less fortunate relatives. President Brown vowed to reduce expenditures before cutting salaries. He dropped the home study department and doled out supplies with a meager hand. But in 1933, the cuts in salaries came anyway. Faculty accepted the cuts stoically, for at least they had employment, and being state employees, good credit. President Brown neither courted nor excited popularity among the students, most of whom stood somewhat in awe of him and his new oak-paneled office. They were more inclined to take their problems to Dean Schrader or other longtime faculty. However, most students were pleased with Brown's efforts to improve the teacher placement system, establishing a structured program to replace Professor Turner's little black book, or seniors simply finding vacancies on their own. Brown also worked rapidly and intensely revamping the curriculum. Not since the days of Arnold Tompkins had the course of study been subject to such fury. However, Brown did not have the gift for direct debate. In fact, he found it distasteful. He ignored the older faculty, preferring to counsel with his own appointees. The more President Brown advanced his ideas without faculty input, the more discontent grew on campus. When the president's actions began to threaten the jobs of the older faculty, the discontent turned to action. A small group of faculty had for some time been aware of charges once leveled against Brown while he was at Oshkosh, and they knew of Wisconsin faculty who would provide proof. Enlisting the counsel of a board member, they proceeded to ask for the evidence, which proved to be startling. The board was asked to investigate, and although the faculty kept a watchful eye, it appeared that nothing was being done. The faculty asked to speak to the chairman of the board to learn why the investigation had not proceeded. Chairman Bardwell received them graciously and told them he had already visited campus, had lunch with President Brown in his home, and was told all was well. He had already sent a report to Springfield exonerating the president. The group asked Bardwell to read 3 letters and a telegram, all relating to a transcript sent by Brown from Oshkosh to Columbia Teachers College in support of one of Brown's recent appointees. The letters stated there was no record of the person ever having enrolled at Oshkosh, and the telegram confirmed the signature on the transcript as that of President Brown rather than that of the registrar. The board was convened to confront Brown with the charges and evidence. They advised him to prepare his resignation. Harry Alvin Brown returned from Springfield, cleared his files, packed his goods, and he and his wife left Normal, never to return. Never before in the long life of the school was it so generally felt that the future and prestige of the institution rested upon the choice for the new president. Dean Schrader was called upon again to serve as the acting president. He put his whole soul into the work, and both the Pantograph and Normalite recommended Schrader for the permanent job. But again, the board looked outside, and on October 9, 1933, announced that Raymond Wilbur Fairchild, professor of education at Northwestern University, would be the next president. Raymond Fairchild was 44 years old and in his prime. He stood 6 feet 4 inches, broad-shouldered and straight. A small child at the Soldiers and Sailors School, seeing him for the first time, asked, "Are you really a giant?" On Fairchild's first visit to campus, he found himself presented to the assembled faculty. He expressed appreciation for Dean Schrader's tireless work and then set the tone that would dominate his administration for the next 20 years. An administration of this school is a purely cooperative enterprise. I shall maintain an open attitude and open door. Not revolution, but evolution will be the policy of progress at this university. In the audience sat the university farm manager with paper in hand. Would the new president authorize the exchange of 17 pigs for 5 calves? Unless a direct trade could be made, it would be necessary to advertise a sale and have the livestock checked by the Department of Agriculture. In that length of time, the pigs would become hogs, and the calves would have reached the butcher's block. Fairchild smiled and reached for a pen. Within an hour, he had met the faculty, made an impromptu speech, and performed his first official duty. One of Fairchild's early efforts was to improve faculty qualifications. Within the first 5 years of his administration, 87% of the faculty had taken graduate work, and by 1938, 34% held doctorates. In 1935, Fairchild established the University Senate, which promptly began discussions of a new grading system, selective admissions, the school calendar, and attendance. 3 years later, the Administrative Council was established to assist in matters of discipline and university operations. As a school superintendent, Fairchild had seen shortcomings in the preparation of teachers. He had his own theories, but wanted to know what others thought. He invited principals and superintendents to come to campus and pursue the question, what's wrong with teachers' colleges? The schoolmen liked the idea, and the roundup became an annual event. In May of 1934, the university held an open house. Despite threatening weather, 3,000 people toured the buildings, saw musical performances, and observed science experiments, almost like a miniature century of progress. The summer of 1934 witnessed two more innovations that would become annual events: an educational conference with noted speakers, and an educational exhibit that included the wares of major school supply houses. The young president was reaching out and bringing people to campus. He added summer handwriting clinics, reading clinics, and parent-teacher workshops that attracted hundreds of people. By 1935, a number of significant changes had also taken place in the curriculum. Psychology was separated from education into its own department. Offerings in other departments were expanded, notably music, art, physical education, visual education, and journalism. In 1937, a publicity office was established to serve as the clearinghouse for university news and issue certain university publications. Broadcasts from the Tower Studios in Cook Hall through Bloomington's new radio station, WJBC, brought special programs and news of campus to alumni and friends of the university. Fairchild saw the same need for buildings as his predecessors. His first interest was a library, and next a place for students to gather between classes. But with 15% of the population still on relief, it was difficult to see how revenues could be diverted to buildings. The library had to wait, but using CWA labor, Fairchild was able to convert part of the basement of the old main into a student lounge. Although Fell Hall had served as a residence and social center for women, there was no comparable center for men. So, in 1934, the University Club leased the large home of Colonel Dudley C. Smith, providing residence for 32 men. Fairchild made use of other federal programs to improve the appearance of the campus and construct new walks, drives, tennis courts, and playing fields. A lounge for women was provided in the basement of the old main, and an excavation beneath Cook Hall created a music rehearsal hall. By excavating here and partitioning there, Fairchild was able to create space for 24 new classrooms and offices. In 1937, building funds began to reappear. Early allocations allowed for the construction of a home management house, known as the Jesse E. Rambo House. In 1938, work began on a new library that would house 500,000 volumes and be named in honor of the university's first and longtime librarian, Ange Milner. Carter Harris, aging janitor of Cook Hall, trudged over to inspect the beautiful new red brick Georgian building. As he stood inside the gray marble foyer looking at the handsome balustrade, he recalled what he had said 5 years earlier. "I was wrong," he mused. "Instead of leaving because the school is too small, President Fairchild is staying and building it to his size." Although President Fairchild had many plans for new buildings and programs, they would have to wait, for ominous events were taking place and the country was again faced with war. As the country joined forces to help the war effort, the facilities of ISNU were placed at the disposal of the federal government, and certain courses were geared to the national emergency. The Industrial Arts Department, in 6-hour shifts, gave round-the-clock instruction in machine tool work, sheet metal, welding, polishing, and blueprint reading. A civilian pilot program was initiated in 1940 with a junked airplane stored on the farm. 9-week instruction was provided in navigation, meteorology, and mechanics. A War Services Council was set up to coordinate student and faculty activities. They supervised fundraising drives, collected information on university personnel in service, collected books, phonographs, and records, made surgical dressings, and served in Red Cross canteens. Faculty were worried about keeping their jobs, but Fairchild vowed to keep a place for all who wished to remain. He encouraged those without doctorates to take advantage of the declining enrollments and engage in advanced study. Extension classes were offered in as many centers as public transportation or gas and tire restrictions would allow. Home economics classes developed healthful meal recipes within the restrictions of sugar and red and blue ration coupons. During the early war years, regular enrollment took a sharp decline, falling from over 1,800 in 1940 to less than 800 in 1943, with only 56 men. Dwindling enrollment and vanishing manpower cast a shadow of apprehension and gloom over the school. A great lift of the general morale came with the announcement in 1943 that the university would receive a unit from the Navy V-12 program. On July 1st, a contingent of 291 men arrived. Most were quartered in Fell Hall, the rest in Smith Hall. Upon completion of the program, students with good records went to midshipman school, while those that failed were dispatched to boot camp or the fleet. When their full schedules allowed, the V-12 men participated in university extracurricular activities. Their trim uniforms of winter blue and summer white added color and life to a campus that deplored complete feminization. Saturday reviews on McCormick Field and morning inspection in front of the Old Main attracted much attention, and an invitation to the Navy V-12 semester formal dance was esteemed by many co-eds as next to making the academic honor roll. Others secretly rated the honors on the reverse order. On a November day in 1943, the community was startled by the shriek of fire sirens, the odor of burning timbers, and the heavy pall of smoke that quickly enveloped the campus. Fell Hall, the Navy ship, was on fire. The Navy men rescued most of the valuables, and fire damage was ultimately confined to the attic and roof. By that evening, seamen had temporary beds neatly arranged in McCormick Gym, and within 24 hours, their kitchen and dining room were again in operation. Less than one half-day was lost from class. 604 seamen were trained at Normal before the V-12 program was disbanded in June 1945. As predicted, the end of the war brought steadily increasing enrollment. Fairchild asked the board to approve selective admissions and a limitation on the total enrollment until classroom and housing could be expanded. But a new graduate degree program would not be postponed any longer. Graduate work was inaugurated in the summer of 1944 with 38 students in 5 qualified departments. The first graduate degree was granted to Charlotte Wilcox in 1945. Equally outstanding among the post-war developments was the Division of Special Education. From its inception, the basic principles of the work in special education included the understanding that every child has a right to the education they can use to their advantage, and teachers should regard their work as an integral, not segregated part of the school system. The General Assembly ultimately provided sufficient funding for the construction of a special education building. The red brick and white stone building in modified Georgian architecture was an imposing structure. The East Wing housed the University Health Service. In February of 1946, Fairchild was informed that Old Main had been examined and found unsafe. Staff were assembled to hear the news. All offices and classrooms above the first floor would have to be evacuated within 48 hours. On May 22nd, the bell tolled for the last time from the once majestic tower. Classes were dismissed, and faculty and students stood mutely by as a giant crane lifted the great dome from its resting place and slowly lowered it to the ground. By the end of the summer, the tower and third floor were removed. A flat roof and steel reinforcement made 12 classrooms and a number of offices available in what was left of the building. The university now had very real reasons to pursue funding for new buildings. Some relief was felt a few years later when many university offices moved into a new administration building on the east side of the quad. This building would ultimately be named in honor of the university's first president, Charles Hovey. In 1947, board member and alumnus Richard Dunn drafted a bill authorizing the construction of self-liquidating projects on Illinois Teacher College campuses. Under this legislation, ISNU constructed 2 dormitories that were ready for occupancy in 1951. The residence for men was named Dunn Hall, while the residence for women was named in honor of Olive Barton, alumna and long-beloved Dean of Women. About the same time, the south wing of Fell Hall was completed after a 35-year wait. A third self-liquidating residence hall for women was opened in 1955 and named in honor of Lewis Walker, alumnus and chairman of the Teachers College Board. Through the efforts of Fairchild and other university presidents, legislation was passed making it possible for teachers' colleges to set up foundations and accept gifts. The university's first such undertaking would be a student union. Fees would have to be assessed and pledges received before a bonding company would advance funds. The student council presented the matter, and a vast majority approved a $10 fee. A campaign was initiated to raise $150,000, and the project was underway. As President Fairchild approached his 20th year, he could well be proud of his labors. The enrollment had almost doubled. The number and qualifications of the staff had been greatly strengthened. Faculty salaries had increased, student entrance qualifications raised, curriculum and off-campus services expanded, a graduate program and division of special education established, off-campus student teaching facilities expanded, and wider faculty participation in policy making through an elected university council had been established. Fairchild was especially gratified over the developments in music and the arts, and he had plans and dreams for more. But on May 24, 1954, upon returning from a trip to Springfield, Fairchild was in such excruciating pain that he had to be taken to the hospital. He underwent surgery, having his right leg removed above the knee. He wanted to return to work, but he was slow in regaining his strength. In 1955, Fairchild asked the board to take steps to secure his successor. Like President Hewitt so many years before, Fairchild would resign, but Normal would remain his home. Dr. Arthur Larson, dean of the university, would serve as acting president. He would manage the completion of the student union, and he would carry on the efforts to secure funding for a new lab school and a classroom building that would be named in honor of Herman Henry Schrader, dean of the Normal School from 1929 to 1946. Meanwhile, the board set about to find a permanent successor to Fairchild. The faculty were invited to participate in the evaluation of candidates, and on March 31, 1956, the board announced that Dr. Robert Bone, assistant provost of the University of Illinois, would become the 9th president of Illinois State Normal University. Almost immediately, Bone set about saturating himself with the history and traditions of the institution that he would lead into its second century of service.